Hello and welcome to this video. In this video I'd like to do a reaction video to a video I second thought. So let's dive into that video right about now. So yeah, this is what happens to rich people under socialism.
This episode is brought to you by Nebula. If you'd like to help support this channel, and the deprogram, and First Thought, consider signing up for Nebula at the link below.
You know, Nebula is really awful. The sponsors, by the way, are just disgusting. They need to clean up their act. I'm saying is don't subscribe to them. Sorry, second thought, but don't. They're not great. They really need to improve. It is a problem which is, you yourself, it could be argued, are a rich person because, even despite the wealth, the potential of wealth is a problem. Like if I have a small business that services, a community, it's unlikely that I'll ever become really wealthy. But if I have a business that serves the world and I'm basically selling a product where I'm just like, oh, pay me money and in return, I'll give you access to content. Oh, okay. Seems kind of like a business that is designed to grow. Doesn't seem very, good there. And that's partially the problem of these kind of things where like, well, when somebody is a YouTuber, when they start talking about socialism and they're not like an individual base. They're not like, oh, here's some content, and if you want to give me money, you can give me money. But there isn't this kind of business-esque where it's like, oh, give me money and you'll get this in return. Give me money, 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 give me money. You should make the content because you enjoy making it, rather than because you understand that if you make this kind of content, more people will subscribe to you and that sort of thing. That's a problem, and this is the sort of issue here where when I look at the likes of Nebula, I'm going, okay, but that in itself is a problem, right? Because you don't have a very ethical sponsorship base. When Audible is sponsoring you, the workers behind Audible who create audiobooks are very underpaid. Like, sure, if you listen to Rick Riordan's newest book, I'm sure they were all well paid, at least in the front section, maybe not in the back section of the actual recording studios, but in the front section they probably were all well paid. But if you look at a smaller book that's like a very indie author and a very indie narrator, those people were paid terribly. I believe Audible has about a 97%. They take 97% of I'm not sure if it's 97 or 92. One of the two of the book sales, and that's a problem because that does beg the question. Well, if you're promoting that, you are promoting a product over its competitors. It's not like you're promoting a product in general. You're promoting a product over its competitors who often pay more. And that is a massive issue. If you look at the likes of Skillshare, you're promoting Skillshare, which is basically just a scam. It's just YouTube behind a paywall. It's not actually anything of substance. You are, in actual fact, basically becoming like a scam artist, Like if someone just downloaded YouTube videos en masse and put them behind a paywall and charged people for that would be copyright fraud. There'd be a criminal thing there, because you'd be getting money from copyright. That is a criminal action. But if someone basically copies them, but copies topics, you can't really copyright the concept of them. Like, tutorials. You can't copyright the concept of a tutorial because, you didn't come up with the concept of a tutorial, so you can't copyright the idea. You can copyright your actual tutorial, but you can't copyright the concept of it. So if someone does a tutorial, well, they can put that behind a paywall. There's an exact copy on YouTube, almost, not exact copy, but it's almost exact copy, and that's free, and they can charge for that. This is why all these things you endorse are oftentimes problematic when it comes to you saying you're a socialist, because they are bad to do. You are doing, often cases when you do sponsorships, you're doing one of three things. You are harming the consumer. You are, not necessarily harming the consumer, but selling them things they don't really need. Do they really need that? No, you don't. Do you even really want that? You kind of only want that once your favorite, not necessarily your favorite, but your YouTuber buddy said, you should get it. And then sometimes just not harming the watcher of the video at all, but harming the people behind that. So if you get HelloFresh, you're kind of doing both. Like you're harming the viewer, because the viewer could potentially, if they have the extra money, just buy the ingredients in the shop and then just like, have you heard of this thing which is called reusing the remainders of things? Like, I've done this multiple times. You'll make something and you'll have a bit of ingredients left over. What do? Well, you use those ingredients in a new recipe. It's a different recipe. It isn't quite enough to make the thing you just made, but it is enough to make something else. You can do that. Very simple. And as well, so it doesn't really harm there. And then of course it's more expensive. HelloFresh is more expensive than if you just got the ingredients as normal. It's also worse for the environment because you're shipping products, and as well for that you are also harming the workers, because HelloFresh workers are terribly treated. And that's another point. The whole issue behind this is that Nebula has terrible systems behind these things. Just, it isn't a very good service in my opinion. Anyway.
Nothing.
There's a problem with this. What do you mean by nothing? Because that's not really socialism, is it? Like, if nothing happens, that means that like, you do realize that there is one like real, like, there are countries that don't have wealth that try to have social programs, that try to effectively do socialism, but they just don't have wealth to begin with. Now, of course, the reason they don't have wealth is because, well, other countries sapped the wealth from them. They would have had wealth, but another country came in and said, we'll have all of that, and that happens there. But the thing is, though, is that when you say this is a problem, because, well, isn't the point of socialism that people are, having social programs, that we don't have this, idea of, free systems of acquisition regardless of the individual sort of lives of people. And the problem, of course, is the wealthy, not necessarily in their own form, but also the wealthy in the form of businesses like, BlackRock and those kind of things, where it's like, well, yeah, that's, you could technically have an investment in these companies where you aren't very wealthy yourself, but the company that you're giving wealth to, because it has so much wealth itself, even though it's made up of very small people, collectively it is a problem. And once it starts acting as if it's a private individual, then that becomes an issue, and which it always will, because obviously that's the most profitable form. And that, of course, is a question: why nothing? Like, surely the first thing is you remove their wealth. Now, obviously, when I say you remove their wealth, I don't say you remove all their money. I'm saying you remove their wealth, as in you bring them down to everyone's level. You, to an extent, not necessarily directly redistribute, but like, you maybe give it to the government, whatever the case may be. You take away the billions of Jeff Bezos and you bring him down to a few 100,000.
You want the honest answer? Not much will actually happen to rich people under socialism.
Socialism is not like, unless you yourself, JD, are imagining yourself to be the dictator in a socialist place, which, would ultimately lead to it no longer being socialism. Because the problem, of course, with a dictator is that, well, dictators tend to be in the unfortunate position of both having all the power, but also, because they've all the power, it means that somebody else goes, oh, what if I killed you, or had you killed, and then I could become the dictator, and then I'd have all the power. So, even when they have the best interest at heart, the problem is that leads to problems. Having someone of ultimate power will lead to others who aren't so ethical to taking that power and being like, well, I'm not going to do the same thing. I might pretend to do the same thing, but I'm not going to. That sort of thing there. Anyway.
They'll genuinely be fine.
Yeah, but there's a difference between nothing happening to somebody and being fine. If you gave me, $500,000, I would probably be fine. I wouldn't be a billionaire. Do you see the difference?
A socialist president wouldn't make Jeff Bezos eat 100 billion Amazon boxes until his little tummy explodes.
Not the same thing as nothing happening, though, is it? That's an extreme of weird murder.
We're not going to bring out the guillotines and pull up Forbes on our phones.
I mean, you do realize, though, that technically speaking, many billionaires, because of the direct actions they've caused, have, sorry for not showing you the screen, have murdered people. They have murdered people. So the question you have to ask yourself is, well, if someone murders someone in the current system, they, in America, could be executed. And in most countries, serve over 10 years in prison So the question would be, well, do you try someone for crimes they were able to get away with under a capitalist system once it becomes a socialist system? Because if you don't, then the problem occurs that what happens to all of those who, did have to suffer punishment? Is that not preferential treatment? Unless you abolish the prison system for murders, for thieves, for torturers, unless you abolish the prison system for all of them, as soon as you get socialism, and that is favoritism, and that is you choosing, and that is not equal.
There aren't going to be free rotten tomato boxes from a local organic farm dropped around town. In
Don't know.
a socialist society,
I don't know how that's similar, but
a former billionaire or CEO would either stay in their position if their workers think they did a good job, or they'd get voted.
this actually isn't really the greatest idea, because the problem, of course, is that, well, when you look at the likes of, a billionaire is somewhat inclined to, a billionaire is inclined to have a system where they're not necessarily the best, but they may appear to be the best. If you look at the likes of Elon Musk's fans, there are less of them than there were, a few years ago, I would say. Although maybe more of them if you include all the right-wing psychopaths who have, joined up. But being the best does not, like, in the eyes of workers, does not mean you are the best. There are all sorts of psychological tricks you can use to appear to be good at a job when you're actually not that great at it. If you look at the schooling system, even the amount of children who are just not great at it at all, they're actually kind of a little bit stupid, but it doesn't really matter. They do well, they do well in the system, and obviously I'm not saying they do incredibly well, but like, if you get like, let's say out of 1,000, like let's say out of 100, you get like 70. That's a fair bit for being terrible at your job. That's a fair bit, that's not that bad, I'm just saying that at the end of the day, when you look at that, it's like, I've seen kids who do not very well, but fairly well, who I'm not saying they put in work, but they weren't the greatest when it came to intelligence. I'm just saying that at the end of the day, that when you have systems in place, it's just a bit of a complicated scenario to say that they're good at their job. Because, okay, but at what point do I just hire someone who is good at their job, and then by virtue of that, I'm good at my job because I hired someone who's good at their job? But like, you know what I mean? It's I'm just it's kind of not really like what does this person do? Jeff Bezos is no longer the CEO of Amazon, is he? Bill Gates is no longer the CEO of Microsoft. Like, what do these people do for their companies they're invested in?
Voted out. Their salary and earnings would probably be reduced so that the gap between the lowest paid and
What about their wealth, their actual wealth they have?
highest paid employee in any company goes down. If they're sitting on a dozen or so empty properties and new housing isn't enough to satisfy everyone's needs,
we have in my country thousands of houses that are held. They're not on the market, they're held by people who have more than one house, but don't have it on either the sale market or the retail market. So there are laws around this which you could introduce even under a non-socialist economy that just stop that sort of thing, which could definitely drive down the need for housing.
they may only be allowed to keep 2,
How about 1?
maybe even 3.
How about 1?
If they got wealthy doing something despicable, like dumping toxic waste somewhere,
But no, look. If you set up an oil company, right? Let's say I set up an oil company. Well, just imagine one will say AF. Just similar. Similar thing. To another company, and I set up this company, and let's say we have a policy where we don't dump stuff, we don't really dump stuff, but then we grow up and become quite a large company, and then one day we have a bit of an accident, and a bunch of our a bunch of our oil lands up in the ocean. That's an accident, though, because you can't really persecute me for that because it's an accident. And let's say this is around the 80s that occurs, so arguably I shouldn't really be still invested in oil because we know that oil is harming the environment. We know that categorically for a fact. We've known that since the 70s, so probably shouldn't be doing this, but maybe I'm lying to myself. I could honestly believe that scientists are just wrong. I could honestly believe that because obviously I'm very much invested in this, and moving to green energy would be less profitable potentially. Well, potentially not though. For me, and that I might honestly not believe them. I'm like, no, this is all scaremonger, completely. They're all wrong. Except, well then, at what point does my actions become bad? Like, if you pick up someone's vase and then it falls out of your hands and smashes on the floor, do you have to pay for that vase? Why did that person have a vase that's so expensive? And what if I retire as CEO? Or my CEO ship basically just becomes the likes of, other CEOs where they're not really, they're in charge, but in more of a sort of way that they could intervene if they wanted to, but they won't. And somebody else dumps stuff intentionally. What do I do there? What, is that my fault? Is it my responsibility to pay for that? Or is it the company's responsibility? These are sort of ethical questions you have to ask yourself.
Their wealth may be used to fix the things they did wrong. And honestly, that's pretty much it.
That doesn't seem like socialism. That just seems like what we have now in many countries, which is definitely not socialism.
Nothing will really happen.
Like you are aware, like right now, companies get fined for when they're discovered to have dumped, like oil or even stuff like sewage dumps. Like that, you get a fine for that. Obviously, the fine is often nowhere near enough to cover the cost, and it is nowhere near enough to actually punish the companies. It's just like, oh really? Oh yeah, we made about 5 billion off of this. Okay, here's your 2 million fine. Oh Jesus, the sewage here seems to have become toxic. I'm gonna move away. That. That sort of occurs there.
To the rich, as in the actual people.
Sorry, what?
Nothing will really happen to the rich, as in the actual people. The category of rich will change.
Yeah, but that's not the point. The point is that you remove the category of rich.
But we'll get to that. Anyway, for some reason, a lot of people are worried that socialism means going on a rampage. And the first thing we need to talk about to correct...
No, I'm just asking honestly. Like, if you do a drug crackdown, or there's an operation that's been going on for years to, go inside like a drug cartel, and there's one day there's a massive arrest, and like thousands of people are arrested en masse. Dealers, people who are addicted, people who are higher up in the system, all this, they're all arrested en masse in this one day, and thousands of people are arrested, and millions of street value of well, actually it would be billions of street value of drugs are seized, and all these sort of things occur, right? The question would be, is that a rampage? Is that not a rampage, or is it not? What is that? Because, that's what we do now.
Correct that impression is that most socialists aren't dumb. Every piece of socialist writing that has ever existed is constantly emphasizing that individual wealthy people are not the problem.
Yes, but it is the wealth they have. And of course the problem is that most people appear not to understand, like, basic maths. And I'm not talking about even, like, for Americans, middle school or high school, or for my country, like, secondary school maths. I'm talking about, like, basic maths. The kind of maths, like division. That's the level of maths you need to understand socialism in its simplest form, in the point of wealth distribution. We only have so much wealth in this world, money-wise. And now, if you don't target the fact that money is fake, then what we'll do is we'll go, okay, so how much wealth do we have in the world? And how many people do we have in the world? Okay, so let's have an equal society. Would you look at that? Our equal society does not allow you to become a billionaire, or even a millionaire. Who would have thought it? So, when you're rushing about the place as a, a fellow with, you're not a billionaire, maybe you're not even a millionaire yet, you might have a tendency to ignore that little bit of division and just sort of go, oh, no, the wealthy will have to do things. Okay. Small error there, though. That simple division is very simple. It's very simple. And it, of course, gets more complex. By the way, I don't really like it when someone says, well, it gets more complex. When someone's just like, it's like this. Well, actually, it's not in any way like that because it gets more complex. Okay, well, no. But in this case, it actually, the beginnings of the simplicity is true. That if you do have a system where you still keep money around, then guess what? You're going to have to understand that, guess what? Those millionaires are going to have to lose their wealth too. And this is often a problem where somebody looks at the likes of America and goes, well, what if we redistributed America? And if we redistributed all the wealth that Americans have, yeah, people will be a lot wealthier. But you have to think about everybody who lives in all over the world. So if you just picked America, yeah, you probably may be able to make, I'm not quite sure because there is issues around like how much of the world's wealth America owns. Because just in America is not really the correct way, because obviously if you have your wealth stored in the Cayman Islands, then that's, while not being in America, it is American-owned wealth, so. But anyway, the point is that there's a little bit of issues regarding country to country. But worldwide, if we had a worldwide system, you wouldn't have that system. You wouldn't have millionaires. You couldn't have millionaires. We don't have enough money to have millionaires. And that's just the thing there, which a lot of people just fail to realize.
Socialists in general recognize that almost anyone in Bezos' position would do what he does. Same goes for Zuckerberg, or Musk, or whoever your favorite billionaire is.
Well, not really. It's more so that anybody who has intentionally become a billionaire will have the same principles. I'm unlikely to become a billionaire if I own Amazon in the early days of Amazon. If I started Amazon, I would unlikely become a billionaire because I'm not going to have the same tendency to go, oh, let's underpay people. Let's outsource things to China. I'm not going to, have scam tactics where I allow scams to operate on my platform and sort of do a bit of whack-a-mole on them, but like still make a bunch of money off their sales. I'm not going to, have systems where I take massive cuts of sellers. I'm not going to have a predatory practice where I'm like, well, I'm going to buy up my competition and still allow them to exist as competition to, give the perception of competition. Like there's lots of websites that Amazon owns that you might think, oh, I'm not buying from Amazon. Actually, you are. Amazon has bought those websites out, and now you think you're not buying from Amazon, but you actually are. So you should actually inspect who actually owns these websites, and sometimes it's a bit harder to figure out. And these sort of things here where I wouldn't do that if I'm an ethical person, and that's a problem there. Where you're going, oh, well, someone in their position, most people in their position would do what they did. Yes, but the point is, they got to their position by being an unethical piece of shit, So you have to ask yourself, okay, but when we look at the people who become billionaires from inheritance, maybe marriage, all these sort of things, often cases, there's a much higher rate of those people being more ethical because they're not people who became their level of wealth from unethical actions. They become their level of wealth from inheritance or marriage or whatever the case may be, or these sort of things where you didn't have to become unethical in order to access that wealth. Now you can be unethical, of course, but there's that there, which I think is an important distinction to make there, which is it's not quite the same thing. It's not as simple as, oh, everyone would do this if they're in the position, or almost everyone, because no, but almost everyone who gets to this position has to have done unethical things. Mostly because if they don't, then the people who are going to do unethical things will crush them.
Exploitation and environmental destruction and doing just about anything for a buck is the name of the game under capitalism, and that's what we take issue with. Not that Jeff specifically is the one doing it. This doesn't stop what these billionaires are doing from being.
Yes, but the problem is when Jeff has, $100 billion, everyone else doesn't have $100,000. Do you understand?
Wrong. But most of it is just perfectly legal, and all we'd want to do is change that to put an end to it, not to punish people. Just make the awful stuff stop. Most of us socialists take issue with the system of power and wealth accumulation that
I mean, interestingly, when you look at the amount of debt that a lot of people gain from like various things like college, car loans, and all, mortgages and everything, they actually are going way over what they even should have, and that's why it's actually kind of interesting. Where from an economic perspective, you're effectively loaning someone more money than you should, but because you're loaning them it and not giving it to them, they actually don't have that money at all. And in effect, the price of the thing they're buying is too high. You know? Like, think about this. In colleges, you have maybe, in my country at least, you might have 250 people per class. Okay, let's do let's say six classes. Okay, with maybe varying amounts of times you do it. So let's say you do let's say 15 hours. Okay, 15 hours. Okay, so 15 hours. So we worked this out. Okay, we worked this out for 15 hours. So so for college education, you're doing 15 hours. And so on and so forth. And that is that going to cost you $90,000? Is it? Is that going to cost you 20,000, 30,000? Is that really going to cost you that much? Because it becomes suspicious when you have that. And it becomes very suspicious when you see college institutions gaining so much money. You know?
that is capitalism, not the individuals who inevitably end up at the top. To put it differently, there are millions of jerks out there that are just as evil as Musk, but who are basically powerless simply because, under this economic system, power can only consolidate in a few people's hands. And I can tell
True.
You're skeptical. A lot of
No, that's a fact, yeah.
people are worried about what socialism might look like after a century of Red Scare rhetoric. It also doesn't help that past socialist revolutions,
Because unless you're a century old, and you wouldn't really, or more than a century, like old, you wouldn't really have experienced that, would you?
just like the liberal revolutions that gave us capitalism, have often been bloody affairs. It's normal to be concerned about that when people like me talk about
I mean, to be fair, some bloody affair, like the French Revolution, at the start, wasn't that bloody. Like the storming of the Bastille only had like 4 people in it, so the Bastille itself had only 4 people in it, so there wasn't, again, that wasn't
making fundamental social and economic changes.
I'm seeing for the weapons.
The history of big changes hasn't often been a series of peaceful transitions of power. I think most historians would agree that's never been the case. I will point out, though, that there's a tremendous amount of bloodshed required to keep the current system chugging along.
Yeah, that's sort of the point, though, isn't it?
My name is Melanie.
Billions of people are kept in artificial poverty when we have enough food and housing for all. Enough jobs that need doing so that no one needs to be unemployed. Enough resources to provide everyone with healthcare and education.
Yeah, but that's my point, though. Education institutions make far too much money. Well, this is the case in most economies. You'll see this. It's kind of interesting when you see like not a socialist economy, but a more left-wing society where education is paid for. Maybe not paid for completely, but paid for at least in part. There is the problem of, well, how much is the education charging in general? Like, even if the government is paying for the education, how much is the government paying? Because in my country, I'm not sure quite how much the government is paying, but I think the government in my country pays about, like, at least, I think it pays collectively around 20,000. So, in actual fact, while I'm not paying the same amount as an American would be paying for college, I would be paying, as a person and the government collectively for me, I would be paying a fairly similar amount for like maybe a lower level college, Not a lower level college in my country, but a lower level college in America is paying the same amount. Not quite I'm not paying it, sure, but the amount that it's making. So you see what I mean? Why it becomes a problem? Because it's not just how much you're paying as an individual, it's also how much is being charged. Profit motives have a problem.
Hundreds of thousands of protesters are brutalized by police and army forces when they complain that life is too expensive and the air.
I mean, let's be honest, that's not going to change unless you have actual controls of the police. The problem is if you give someone a power position, then it's going to attract people who like to abuse power. And the problem with unethical people is that unethical people, tend to act unethically, meaning that, it's the same reason why CEOs tend to be problematic. The same reason why, like, if a CEO, like a CEO will turn out to be like a sex pest or something like that, because Well, it's a power position, and power positions attract people who like power. So police, as a position, will attract people who like power. So regardless of your situation, your society, it's not going to change the fact that, well, that's how that works. Sorry, but you're going to need to do more than just have socialism to do that. Oh, sorry, a little problem there. Sorry, a little issue there, but anyway, we're back now.
It's getting unbreathable. Not to mention how gruesome wars are constantly waged for the profit of a few defense.
It is interesting. Sorry to cut you across, but it is interesting. I wonder, will we all die because of climate change? Because I think there's certainly a problem where we look at the likes of the Elon Musk types who are definitely ready to axe us all. You've got the humanoid sex robots that he's building, so you can have intercourse with them. He has all these Neuralink, for example, where it's like, oh, get immortality by uploading your mind onto a chip, and there's all these sort of things here which are definitely look like escape plans. And people start formulating escape plans and not solving the solution, you have to ask yourself, well, is this their plan? Just to...
and oil companies. But
yeah, I mean...
even given all that, it's still perfectly normal to be worried about the possibility of additional violence. And that's why I want to make this video. What I want to clear up is the false idea that violence against the wealthy would be a part of regular socialist society, because it simply
wouldn't be regular, would it? I'm just saying, if you seize the assets of somebody, they're no longer wealthy. At that point, you can't really have continuous violence against them.
Wouldn't be. The main concern of socialism is equal democratic and economic power. A guaranteed higher...
that equal economic power doesn't allow you to have multiple properties in your property portfolio. It doesn't allow you to continue to be a billionaire. You can't just go, well, you know what? Jeff Bezos is no longer allowed to cash those checks. Okay. He's no longer allowed to earn millions and billions off his assets. Okay. Is he allowed to keep the money he has now? Because that seems like a problem.
Higher standard of living, coupled with a more extensive democracy. In this system, essentially, no one should get wealthy enough to exploit someone else.
But we already have other people, so we're going to have to see still has an
And become
So at what point do you no longer allowed to have any more? What point do you have a cap?
democratically unaccountable. Businesses compete, the winners monopolize and oligopolize, and basic needs are gatekept while companies are given a license to destroy or appropriate common resources. The ultra-wealthy have an outsized influence in politics and in the workplace, and the entire economy is geared towards maximizing their ability to profit. In some cases, profit and human well-being go together. In most,
I mean, it would be interesting if you brought a law in that said that if you tried to bribe a politician that your assets could be seized. Like, this should obviously not be in a socialist country. It could definitely, bring in a more interesting factor, because it would, politicians would go, well, I mean, I could take this bribe. Or I could turn you in, have your assets seized, and now that we have extra wealth, put some more wealth into my department and maybe give myself a little pay rise.
Not so much. Under capitalism, what decides if something happens isn't popular approval, but profitability, which is determined by how much employers exploit their employees.
Yeah, it's not really, even when it comes to profitability though, things are, you can ensure certain things are profitable.
How wealthy or desperate their consumers are, and even how recklessly they can destroy the environment. The idea is to stop all that by bringing the economy under democratic control. To have workers elect their boss, or choose to restructure their workplace entirely based on their expertise in actually doing the work. To have natural monopolies and other parts of the economy controlled by a democratic government. To have some market mechanisms not guided by profit. To replace private banks with public banks, with appointed or elected representatives. Instead of a board of directors trying to figure out how to make workers pee in more bottles, a democratic council would decide the best way to use something like Amazon's distribution network and algorithms to actually benefit society. The point is, nothing happens to wealthy people under this arrangement. The rich are just not part of the plan. Not the individuals, they can stick around, but the idea of someone getting obscenely...
okay, maybe I've missed this, but they are wealthy now. This isn't like someone that has introduced capitalism, a few years ago, and the wealthy aren't quite wealthy yet, but they will be. They will be. We know from other countries they will be. No, they're wealthy now. They have billions now. They have millions now. We're gonna have to solve that solution. Get the solution from that.
Wealthy in this society seems pretty pointless, and ideally impossible. As a real-life anecdote, look at how the last emperor of China was treated after their revolution. They didn't off the guy.
I mean,
They gave him a re-education, helped him
okay, that sounds that sounds dodgy, but a re-education. What are they doing to the Uyghurs now? I'm just saying, maybe don't go down that road.
understand why the position of emperor was outdated, and
Yeah, no, that sounds like yeah, that sounds a little bit too close to being a Nazi, to be honest.
eventually he became a member of China's National People's Congress, helping
Yeah,
to make progress alongside the very same people he had previously oppressed. He was reintegrated into a better society.
Sure. Okay, small question. Very convenient, by the way, that the emperor, managed to somehow become actually good at politics. That's
In a future socialist system,
kind of defeats the sort of idea of that they are that we should have a system where the actual people who are actually good at the job should get the job, because the person who just got the job from birth got the job anyway.
the rich and powerful themselves
Also, China's not really a socialist country, is it though? It's not though.
would be fine. But most of the privileges and
Yeah, like that's another thing. Like if you own one house, okay, I could own a mega mansion in Los Angeles, or I could own a little shack in Connemara. I mean, those properties would be worth, in value, between hundreds of millions and probably less than 200,000.
access to power that create billionaire levels of wealth just wouldn't exist. The only
But they have it now.
way to become incredibly wealthy in a socialist
But they have it now.
society is to have a unique set of skills. The way an actor or an athlete
Sorry, what?
incredibly wealthy in a socialist society,
Sorry.
wealth just wouldn't exist. The only way to become incredibly wealthy in a socialist society is to have a unique set of skills.
Oh, Liam Neeson. Okay. Can I ask you? Do you think it might be a problem? You'd have to then abolish inheritance anyway. Because if you're creating a rule that says only if you were really skilled at something, I would argue there's a problem with this. If people are very stupid, like your fans, and they subscribe to the Audible when you tell them to and do all that, that's not you having a unique set of skills that actually provides value. That's you being an advertising agent. Now, a person who's very good at advertising has a very unique set of skills that are very, very valuable to selling products to people who don't need it. Now, that's very, very useful and can make a lot of money and is very, very profitable. Oh, it's unethical though. What you're doing when you endorse Audible, that's unethical. Because your audience, who I presume would be against, workers being paid fuck all for the work they're actually doing, and their overmasters getting paid, like 9 times what they're getting paid, I would assume you'd be against that, or at least your audience would, but you're still doing it, you're still endorsing that for money. So, do you deserve that wealth? No, though, this is not a good idea. Like, I don't think wealth should be a thing you should have, flat,
The only way to become incredibly wealthy in a socialist society is to have a unique set of skills. The way an actor or an athlete becomes incredibly wealthy under capitalism.
Okay. Yeah. So you're saying no, though. But, sorry. I'm a bit confused. You're saying that shouldn't be the case. This is actually a very bad reaction. You're saying that this shouldn't be the case under socialism. Or are you saying that it... what?
Being basically irreplaceable might command a higher price for your labor. But even then, you'd still end up with a much more equal society. Some inequality might still persist, but at a
No, you should not become wealthy.
much different
Flat.
scale and within a much, much smaller range.
What happens to all the mansions? Would divvy them up and turn them into apartments?
The difference between capitalism and socialism is that you wouldn't be able to get wealthy by paying workers less than the amount they bring in for your company. You couldn't gain wealth by exploitation, and that's it. You're still skeptical. No problem.
No, I'm skeptical of your argument. It's very weird. It's sort of like a self-serving argument where you can become wealthy yourself.
Here's another reason you shouldn't be worried about what happens to rich people under socialism. Most socialists are very anti-punishment. Just talk to your lefty friends and you'll see. Most socialists today are at the forefront of the restorative and...
See, here is my point though. That's what you have to do. You have to allow all the murderers, all the thieves, all the exploiters, all the people who, all the scammers, you have to allow them all out of prisons, out of any punishment. Channels like Scammer Payback, they have to shut themselves down because that's not ethical if you allow the billionaires free. Is it?
Transformative justice movements, as well as the prison abolition and anti-death penalty movements. The most famous...
Well, most countries, well, not most, but like a good chunk of countries don't have the death penalty. That's
representative of this
not the same thing,
socialist position.
Most countries have prisons, but not a lot of countries don't have the death penalty, so,
Is probably someone like Angela Davis.
Although you could argue, technically speaking, a life sentence is just the death penalty, just in a more slow way. Like, if I sentence you to life in prison, like, okay. But if I'm imprisoned for the rest of my existence, then that's a death sentence.
Who's
arguably it's worse than death sentence.
Campaigned for all of these causes for decades. The idea of punitive justice, or the eye for an eye logic that governs a lot of our justice system today,
that's a bit off topic. I'm just obviously prison abolition would also include removing that.
Is deeply unpopular in the modern left, and one of the things that socialists are adamantly against. In parallel to socialist ideas about changing systems, we would much rather make crime less economically necessary or less enticing by ensuring everyone's needs are met unconditionally.
What happens to the person who's a capitalist who wants to have wealth and is willing to act unethically to do so?
Then by threatening people with a violent state apparatus.
See, there's two types. There's the person who needs to eat, needs to sleep, needs to live. And there's type 2, which is wants a lot of money. Type 1, it's obviously, that's very, very easy to solve. You just satisfy your needs. But type 2, you can never solve that. Because that insatiable greed, that will never be satisfied. It'll never be satisfied. How do you deal with that person?
We would much rather strip people of their power over others and institute a more developed democracy that extends to the workplace than allow a few to gain power through exploitation and punish them when they, predictably, use that power to those ends. Socialists promote structural change first and foremost.
Right. Bit of a problem. It's about saying, well, we'd rather, have the murderer not have access to the drugs than, punish them when they poison someone with drugs. I would like to solve their want to kill, not their ability to do so. Because, well, then you have a bunch of people who want to kill someone but just aren't able to walking around. That's
foremost, and are
not solving the problem.
Against punitive justice as a way to solve structural issues. The idea that this would just not apply to those who happen to be wealthy is possible, but realistically very unlikely. And of course, this isn't to say that a socialist society would be without the means to punish people who commit.
And what about those who don't believe in socialism, under socialism, who don't believe it's good, don't believe it's the right way to do things? What about them? What do you do in that case?
Crimes. Historically, after
that person will want to end socialism, that person will want to have change. How would you do that person?
Every revolution, there have been elements, often funded by one of the capitalist powers, that tried to undermine the socialist project through acts of terror. This wouldn't be acceptable in a socialist society any more than it is in a capitalist one. Those people would still face the consequences of their actions, whatever those consequences are determined to be. But
what are they determined to be, though?
On the whole,
you can't really go into a system and go, well, they'll face the consequences, whatever they may be. Who knows?
The goal of socialist justice is to be more restorative than punitive, as we saw with the example of the Chinese emperor. I get that all this conflicts with the popular ideas most people have about socialism, but let's be clear. Don't mistake eat the rich sweaters for a policy proposal.
Yeah, no, because cannibalism is in general not a great idea for yourself. Actually, interestingly, there's a principle which is that which comes first? Is cannibalism that drives you mad? Or is it that you are driven mad and then you go and consume people? It's a bit of a thought,
With so much violence committed by capitalists and their institutions against the working class and the environment, it's understandable that anger will bubble up and find its expression in edgy slogans. But as far as solutions to capitalism's violence go, eat the rich isn't one of them. Eating the rich without changing the system that reproduces unaccountable billionaires isn't progress. It's just a funny quote. And just in case billionaires...
Yeah, except there's a small problem with that. If you abolish inheritance and you eat the rich, you axe them. The thing is that they no longer are wealthy then.
Isn't progress. It's just a funny quote.
How much wealth is based off of, previous wealth,
And just in case some of you try to misrepresent what I'm saying, none of this is to say that disruptive protests are illegitimate or anything. Civility and non-violent protests are a sacrifice protesters make. To go in front of armed police forces and refuse...
There is, of course, a problem, and this is the issue. How will you achieve socialism? As a socialist, how will you achieve it? Because if you just protest with a little sign, nothing is going to happen. It is the equivalent of saying to the person who's kidnapped you, well, maybe you should stop. This is bad. It's like, no, but they're not going to care because they're the person with power, and the person with power doesn't care about that. The problem, of course, is if you think it is so unethical, you know what's going to happen? If you turn enough people away from it, they're just going to break the next election. They're just going to set up a political system where the socialists can't get into government, or if they can, that they're only going to get into government in small little sections. It's going to be very hard to get socialism without having to resort to certain activities. It's all I'm going to say. Because, some things are going to be a little bit out of your reach. The problem with ethics is that, well, the person who acts ethically is unlikely to get anything. But the person who acts unethically is going to get a lot of things because, they're being unethical,
Refuse to punch back. No one should demand from those who are oppressed that they should continue being oppressed to stay legitimate and valid.
Yeah.
This video isn't some kind of condemnation of all violence or an appeal to complacency. I'm simply clearing up...
No, because that's pointless and, in effect, just wasting your time. Because you are wasting your time, really. If you just go, well, I believe in socialism, so there. Not going to actually do anything about it, but, there we go. Oh. Maybe we could do a union style thing. Where instead of just protesting, we just remove all the labor. Just every little bit of labor. And just say, that's great, Amazon. Enjoy Prime Day. There are going to be no workers shipping those products. There'll be no one ordering products. There'll be nobody creating products. And, yeah. Enjoy.
The false idea that daily socialist operation depends on punishing the rich, like many pundits seem to imply. The idea you have in your mind that socialists just want to bonk billionaires to solve the problems of capitalism is simply wrong.
I mean, technically speaking, Bill Gates has killed many people. And has also stolen many intellectual properties, allegedly.
It's not a solution. Ending a system...
I mean, he's retired, isn't he?
...system that produces billionaires is the #1 goal, not hurting people. We don't want jerks with the authority to change our understanding of what qualifies as a toilet. The problem is the system, not the jerks. Let's be even clearer. For someone uber wealthy under capitalism, life under socialism would be different. An end to exploitation and permanently rising inequality.
But you'd have to remove their wealth, though.
Quality,
not just their salary.
Would certainly mean fewer privileges.
Yeah, but I just... sorry. Just...
Status. Certainly less power to boss people around. And most likely, less ability to enjoy excessive luxury at will. But that's probably it. Less power, less privilege, but a life that continues to be more than comfortable as the standards for all of society are raised. Accountability not to boards of directors, shareholders, and the market, but to a democratic workers' association. And perhaps most importantly, the opportunity to be a part of a new project that actually improves the conditions of our species. The thing all these billionaires claim to want to do. Under socialism, they could use that drive, if it's genuine, to really contribute. Socialism is the way forward.
Okay, seems like.
Even if you're a billionaire.
Is it though?
Howdy friends, I'm excited to announce that I'm recording this sponsor read from the brand new Second Thought office. That sounds a little fancier than it really is, but I did recently move the whole studio setup to a larger space, and I've got a bunch of cool stuff planned for the near future. If you enjoyed this video, consider dropping a like. If you hated it, a thumbs down. You can watch my other content by following the links on your screen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
So, I will put a thumbs down for this, unfortunately. Didn't think it was a great video. Yeah, so that's that. Not the best video in my opinion. Needed work. Introduction was a bit of a problem, and a few points there that made a little lack of sense. Personally, could do with some revision. Wouldn't obviously do this video if it was a small channel, but just a little bit concerning when it comes from Second Thought, who is one of the more successful people on this platform. So yeah, all in all, not the best video, I would have to say. Wouldn't personally do that, chat. Anyway, to sum it up, I'd have to say that under socialism, you'd kind of have to, seize the wealth of the billionaires, not just stop the salaries. You couldn't just allow them to have two homes. You can only have one home, because, that's not really a very fair society. Not really a good society there. I don't really believe that renting should be a thing, because there's no, even from a perspective of a capitalist perspective, from an individual perspective, you shouldn't rent. The only thing is, well, obviously, if you don't have the money, you have to. But from a financial point of view, it's stupid to rent. It's just that, once again, if you don't have the money, you have to. So the way I make it, at the end of the day, it's just like, doesn't make much sense to have two properties there. You really shouldn't be able to become wealthy at any point, because that's, if you're the most skilled person on the planet, because, well, why? I also don't really believe in nebula as a concept, because, well, nebula is a bit of a dodgy situation. They really need to clean up the game. They need to, their sponsorship system is very bad. They don't have the best people who agree to do sponsorships with them. I don't mean creators, I mean actual businesses. Their strategies of the go, it's creator owned, is not really great, because, well, it's owned by a management company, which some creators are honest about, but other creators are very not honest about, which is dodgy. And all creators are like a little bit dodgy when they talk about it, not very honest. So yeah, that's not great there. So, when you look at all that, I would have to say, well, no, though. Because at the end of the day, what is content but a business? And my question for Second Thought is, are your positions maybe just because that little bit of wealth? At what point do we seize it? At what point do we stop it? At what point do we say no more for your salary? Because it appears you are getting pretty close to that. And, well, not sure if you should be there at the table making decisions when you yourself, it could be argued, are a rich person. I'll see you later. Goodbye.